You enjoyed that. I enjoyed it. Can't stop praising His name. Thank you for your giving tonight, and platform workers, singers. We really appreciate it. Nicole White and I have been scheming for her to do a special music, and it was going to be timed when I was going to preach. And I told her, be ready. And Pastor Martinez, as Pastor Campbell mentioned, had to get his hand taken care of, had to have a Lance this afternoon. He called me, said, be ready to preach. So I'm ready to preach. So I told her, be ready to sing. So let's give Nicole White a welcome as she comes. She's going to sing for us. Judges 16 tonight. Samson, what an interesting guy. His story reads like a narcissistic superhero. His kryptonite weakness finally does him in at the end of his life. Here's a guy who has a lot of skeletons in his closet. When the writer of Hebrews chapter 11 includes Samson in the Hall of Fame of Faith, you have to wonder how. You think, Samson, really? So many failures. He died in Dagon's collapsed temple. His two brothers had to make a long road trip to collect his body out of the rubble. And I'm not sure what his brothers would say as they are traveling miles along dirt roads, knowing that there's 1,000 other people buried with him. And I imagine they had quite a conversation about their brother, because you've heard it said across this pulpit many times from our senior pastor, sometimes life doesn't turn out quite like you thought or hoped it would. And I can imagine the two brothers, they having a conversation, possibly saying, who would have ever thought it would end like this? He's our big brother. He's got everything going for him. I mean, the angels announced his birth. He's born into a faith-filled family. Nazarite vows set aside for kingdom purpose from day one. And I'll pause right there. In this church, there are many of you that have been set aside since day one for God's purpose and God's calling. And don't ever forget that. Imagine maybe the youngest brother saying, you know, I thought he was invincible. Remember the lion? Here he is. He's buried blind in the rubble of Dagon's temple. So what happened to Samson? I want to look at that this evening, because the story of Samson is a story of one that's larger than life. Absolutely one of the most amazing characters in the Bible. He's perplexing. He's contradictory about himself. He's a bafflement for the entire Bible. He should have been a godly man, but he wasn't. He shouldn't have been in Hebrews 11, but he was, and we'll see why. So I want to minister tonight on Samson exercising faith while unfaithful. Judges 16, verse number 20. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. So he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as before at other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. Father, I pray for great favor in this assembly. You would prosper those that have been born into the faith, God, that you would guard it and protect it, that you would electrify their spirits. And for those of us that came into the faith at later times in life, I pray, God, that you would trigger things in our minds and our heart. Let us see the truth tonight. Let us be a faithful people. Let us finish this race in these last days in Jesus' glorious name. It's possible tonight to have everything going for you, but still mess it up. How many know what I'm talking about this evening? Have everything laid out for you and still choose your own way, choose the incorrect way, choose the wrong way. And this is just the beginning of the story. There's a number of reasons why Samson, his story tonight is well known, yet little is understood. If you were raised in church, or if you brought your kids to Sunday school, you know all about the story of Samson and Delilah, the cutting of his hair, the pushing down of the temples, and him dying in his last days. But I want to kind of figure out tonight what made Samson tick. And how could a person who started so well end up so poorly? And this is where I get really nervous for myself. If I'm nervous for myself, I'm nervous for people as well. It's easy to start out well, but to end up poorly. And listen tonight, if you're considering detaching from the faith, don't. There is nothing to hold on to in this world, but the world will give you something to hold on to. So guard yourself this evening. How does he end up in Hebrews chapter 11? What did God see in this man? In short, there's a lot more to the Samson story than meets the eye, because we're a lot like Samson, and he is a lot like us. Sometimes you read the stories of Moses and Abraham, and you can't quite fit there. You know, you got one who's got the Ten Commandments. You have another one that walked with God. And somehow these are like the fathers of the faith, where, you know, they're way out there. But you look at Samson, he's kind of like us. He's flawed. But he came from a godly home like a lot of our people. Most guys know what it's like to be tempted. There's a reason why revenge movies appeal to a certain genre of people, because people just want to see somebody get even. So we get this guy. I mean, I do get Samson. And in some ways, that's a little bit nerve-wracking to me, but I do understand this guy. Got a lot going on for him. Compare him to a lot of the other heroes in the Bible. But not many had an advantage like this man. Angelic birth, favor, blessing. Where did he go wrong? You don't have to wonder about the answer. Judges 14 tells us the whole entire story. This tragic story, how a man who had it all let it get away from him. In particular, it reveals some of his mistakes. Hopefully, we learn from other people's mistakes. But how many know tonight they can be all around us, and sometimes we just don't learn? Sometimes we're stubborn and we refuse to learn from mistakes. But there are things that you can do today, tonight, this service, during this message, during this altar call, that can set you up for victory, not only tomorrow, but in the future to come. But how many know it's possible tonight to exercise faith also while you are unfaithful, and you will set yourself up for another type of a future? Firstly, tonight, Samson, he went to the wrong place. Judges 14 begins this way. Samson went down to Timnah. The writer tells us two things about this. Timnah, gives us a little bit of geography. Timnah is really close to Zorah, which is where Samson's village is. So he cruises down to Timnah. The only problem with Timnah is Timnah was the home turf of the Philistines. He shouldn't be there. It also tells us a little bit about Samson's spiritual life. His first public act that we read about, he leaves the land of Israel for the land of the Philistines. Listen, the moment you turn 18 is not the time to leave your land here at the church and run off to Timnah or the world to get a taste of the flavor of what it has, because there are people here that will tell you the world will burn you, and they don't care. When I ran out of money before I was a Christian, some of my friends who I thought were my friends didn't want to have anything to do with me because I could no longer buy or provide any longer. The truth is, the world will eat you up and spit you out. It just does. That's the way it's wired. So Samson is off to the land of the Philistines, leaves his friend, leaves his mission, his vision from God, and to visit his enemies. This is much more than kind of a casual getaway weekend that we may have. Samson went to Timnah looking for a wife, and that's the first mistake. And the mistake for many people is they go to the wrong place. It's possible tonight for your faith to become detached when you go to the wrong place. Secondly, this evening, he was looking for the wrong thing. In Judges 14, verses 2 and 3. Notice carefully what the text says. Samson went down to Timnah, and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned home, he told his parents, I've seen a Philistine woman. After his father objects, he says, go get her for me. She's the right one for me. She's right in my eyes. And so the Bible's telling us something about Samson. Crucially, he saw this woman. She looked good, and he wants her for his wife. He doesn't care if she's spiritual, obviously, because she's not only a believer, she's from the wrong place. She's from the enemy of the people of God. Listen, ladies, Pastor mentioned it this morning. Samson was looking in the wrong place for the wrong thing, for the wrong reason. Who you marry makes a difference tonight. It really does. And there are people here that can tell you that, that it really does make a difference. The other side of the truth is, if you go looking in the wrong place for the wrong thing and the wrong reason, is it shouldn't be any surprise that you might find it. Lots of times people say, you know what, I'm just going to go check this out. I'm going to get high once. I'm going to drink once. I'm going to do this once. I'm going to get close to this guy or this girl once. And you have no intent on this becoming part of your lifestyle or part of your makeup or part of your morality. And next thing you know, you find yourself in the place that you never, ever thought you would. In life, you get what you pay for. And Samson is investing in all the wrong places. Thirdly, tonight, Samson rejected godly counsel. Now, this bothers me. In our church, we're very fortunate to have numbers of couples who have pastored, have been missionaries. They know what it's like to leave everything. They know what it's like to serve in a foreign land. They know what it's like to serve in a local city. We have a staff with multiple pastors. We have our senior pastor, Pastor Campbell, Pastor Martinez, myself, Pastor Hill, Pastor Bobby. There is no reason why somebody shouldn't have access to godly counsel. The same was true for Samson, but he rejected godly counsel, and so his downward spiral continues. He's made some mistakes, but they're not fatal, but that is about to change. There's this reaction to his parents. His parents are not really down with him marrying this Philistine girl. As a matter of fact, the parents say, isn't there an acceptable woman among your family or among our people? In other words, can't you marry someone who is part of our same faith? Who's from our same church? Who believes what we believe, and this is what any godly parent would do. They're not going to just say, yeah, go free date whoever you want, do whatever. I did it with my family, and I know you wouldn't with yours, but Samson wouldn't have anything to do with it. The reason is clear, because if you marry a sinner, listen, why would you want to marry somebody who's outside the faith? The truth is, if you marry someone like that, most likely he or she is going to turn you away from the things of God. It just happens. I hear it over and over again. Pastor, I'm just going to win them to Jesus. And next thing you know, they're gone. The whole Bible is against this. Mixed faith marriage is one of the cleanest or clearest teachings in the Bible. And all because of this rush of emotions, they decide to ignore what God said. And this is what Samson did. You know what? You don't have to get married tonight. But if you do, you should marry someone who loves God as much as you do. That's really not complicated. It really isn't. It's not that difficult. As the saying goes, and I've said it, it's better to be single than to wish you were. So Samson rejects godly counsel from his parents, and also he rejects God's counsel.
I don't know.
But this was inevitable. We shouldn't be laughing about it, although this is kind of funny right now when you preach about it a few thousand years later. But you know, when you go to the wrong place looking for the wrong thing with the wrong values in your heart, this is what happens. even if you think you're better than that. Because you end up rejecting the counsel of those who know better. Samson also suffered, fourthly tonight, from something I've written down as the pitfalls of pride. That's in Judges 14, verses 6 through 10. You can read that on your own. He plays with fire with his spiritual commitment. And his success begins to build pride. You've heard this said both maybe in the world and in the church. Oftentimes, a failure is not so much when someone is not experiencing great success, rather it is when they are experiencing great success. Because the great temptation of life is when you are successful, somewhere, somehow in your mind, a combination of people will tell you all the reasons why you're successful. You're well-spoken, you handle people well, you dress well, you minister well, there's a grace on your life, there's an anointing on your life, you have the ability to move people with your words, and they just begin to give all these accolades. And listen, it seems like whatever Samson did was good in the beginning. God gave him supernatural strength, right? He was Hercules, the first Hercules. Sometimes, if you're not careful, when you play with fire, your spiritual commitment, success will build pride, which eventually kills someone, and it killed him. I cannot speak of how many men in our fellowship, masterful preachers, fantastic churches. I was talking to someone the other day a little bit about this without being disparaging to a large group of people, but you know what? Rebellion will set you back. We used to have a conference in California in the fellowship 30 years ago. We no longer have a conference church. Oceanside, California, when they sent a team to outreach for us, in San Diego, California, they could send 100 Marines to our church for outreach. 100. The church had 400 people. Fullerton, California, not our Fullerton, but another church, had 250 people. Rancho Cucamonga, California, 350 people, and a conference. As a matter of fact, we were launched out of the very first California conference. I could go on to say El Centro, California, 500 people. I could speak about Yuma. I went to 2 conferences a year at Yuma, and some of you did. I went May and November to those conferences, and I'm sorry that rebellion and pride has some consequences, not only on the individual, but on a large body. So we always have to be careful, because sin always infects those around you. He kills the lion, breaks a vow, right? The Nazirite vow. I can't touch anything that's dead. So he touches it. He gets done doing what he's doing, goes back across land again, finds that honey has been formed because bees formed a hive in this old lion. He pulls the honey out, right? Touches the dead carcass again. God says, you can't touch anything. You're a Nazirite, bro. So you can't do that. No one does it. It's got the honey, eats of it, brings it home, gives it to his parents. Doesn't tell his parents where he got it from, so he curses his parents as well. Because sin doesn't only affect you, it affects those around you. It's the first invisible virus. It's sin. Samson knows God will be faithful to his word, and this is where the title of my sermon comes from, Exercising Faith While Unfaithful. And this is really how Samson got into Hebrews chapter 11, because Samson knows that God is faithful to his word. He says, listen, I'm going to accomplish this. You can see this. He knows God's gifting is with him. He knows he has skill. He knows he has strength. He knows he has favor, even when he is disobedient. It's possible to sing a song and it sound anointed, and behind the scenes, you're not living right for God. It's possible to preach and that to happen. It's possible to be Samson and have all the signs on a regular basis that everything is okay, but behind the scenes, we're not faithful. Because Samson knows God will be faithful to his word. And here is the danger with the gifted, the prideful, and the skilled people, because after a while they no longer have to practice or read or dig into the things of God, because they are skilled and they know God is going to honor it. But the truth is, they have faith in God to carry out his word, but they don't believe that they need to be faithful to God's word. So what does it produce? The pitfalls of pride. If you're not careful, gifting and talent and success, we have a lot of gifted people here. There's a lot of people here that God has just given you favor. Favor tonight is kind of like God's unmerited grace. Something we don't deserve, but we inherited. Someone came. We have a number of people here that helped build this church from day one. And they made that easier for you and I to come in and walk in the blessing. You've heard our pastor has been here for decades now. Listen, the price that's been paid makes it a lot easier for you and I to go forward. But I want to tell you this evening, it's possible tonight to find yourself in a place in life where you're just functioning. What's the outcome of those that are gifted, talented, have success and favor, but they no longer are faithful to God? One of the results is an absolute undisciplined life behind the scenes. In our case, Samson's undisciplined life behind the scenes, the things he was doing that he shouldn't have been doing, started to become apparent to everyone around him. And we'll see this as the story goes on, as they can see this. It's no different than his parents saying, listen, you shouldn't be down there in Timnah. It's no different than a friend here would say, listen, you shouldn't be hanging out over there. Or you shouldn't be doing this, or listening to this, or thinking about this, or a pastor giving you some insight saying, listen, I wouldn't do that if I were you, and here's why. We don't live people's lives for them here. We really don't. And we can't. But we oftentimes do know what the outcome can be. Here's Samson. And his excuse is, but God is still using me. Because every time I wake up, I still have the strength. I'm sharper, I'm more crafty, I'm witty, I hear from God, and I know God is going to be there. He's breaking every single vow, but God is still there. And I can imagine, if we go back to the two brothers now, they're walking to the rubble of the temple of Dagon, and they got to be saying, how can God bless him when he's unfaithful? He only has one vow left to break before God, and that is the cutting of his hair. He's broken every other one. And Samson is a picture of a believer that goes further and further away from God, and it starts simply. It's what eventually happens. You begin to drift away. You miss the service. You miss the excitement to love God and serve God and just be in his presence. Sometimes I'm just happy with singing and worship. I really am. And you drift away. Test the waters, carefully wandering where we don't belong.